Good evening. Thank you, President Robinson, Vice President Gautier, and board members and Superintendent Bolson. So I am here this evening with the privilege of sharing with you the recommendation of the calendar committee for the school calendar for 2020-2021. So thinking ahead a little bit, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the process that we utilized this year. It was slightly different than in years past. So as you are aware, you've already approved the calendar committee, which was comprised of over 30 individuals, including educators, business people, parents, students, represented by Mr. Walker, of course. And then we also had the privilege of having two board members join us for the calendar committee this year. Ms. Gautier and Ms. Riccardi were able to be a part of the discussions, which we greatly appreciated having the three of you there to represent the board. So when we met, we went over a few different things. The first being, obviously, the requirements for the calendar. So the calendar has a few things that every year we have to make sure that we have in place. 180 days for students, 190 days for teachers, a minimum of 6 inclement weather days as part of the board policy, and then, of course, professional development best practices were some things that we went over with the calendar committee. In addition to that, we also went over some of those official holidays that are per the negotiated agreement so that we must include in the calendar. And then in addition to that, those holidays that have traditionally been recognized by board members in the past. And then, of course, that reminder about our quarters and those logistics that we have to think about. So again, that committee came together one evening, and all of those individuals, including those from our board, were able to sit down and discuss the calendar. In past years, the calendar committee has received a recommendation. We come with a concept already designed for the calendar committee. This year, we changed it up a little bit. Instead of doing that, what we did was we provided a calendar to the committee that only listed those dates that had to be on the calendar. So those negotiated closures, as well as some early dismissal days that we've observed in the past. You'll see those around, for example, the Christmas holiday, Thanksgiving holiday, and then of course the Easter holiday. So you'll see those on there. And this is all that was given to each of the committee members. From there, the committee was broken into small groups, and they, utilizing this calendar, decided when the school year would start, when it would end, and what that time in between that start and end date would look like. So the calendar committee came to the agreement that the first day of school that they would propose to the board for consideration would be September 1st. This would follow 4 days of PD for all staff and 2 days for PD for new staff just prior to that. And then, of course, we have the Labor Day holiday on September 7th. And then, as you can see, we go through with additional professional development and early dismissals. In September, you have an early dismissal on the 25th, which allows for professional development with staff in the afternoon once students are dismissed. So those purple days throughout the calendar are those early dismissals. We also have on October 16th, you'll see that is a professional development day, as well as November 2nd and April 6th. I'm sorry, and I skipped March 5th. I point those out specifically because that is something that this calendar committee was invested in, making sure that our staff had those full professional development days. If you have reviewed this year's calendar, you won't see those. What you'll see are early dismissal days for professional development throughout the school year. So this allows that full PD opportunity. And then the calendar committee was also in support of ensuring that students had a few breaks throughout the school year. Christian shared some feedback on that, as well as some other individuals, which was extremely helpful to have that dialogue. You'll see that the end of the school year, we have the last day for students. If we start September 1st, even with these additional closures throughout the school year, if we were to happen to not have any inclement weather, no snow calls from me, then the last day would be on June 9th for students. If we needed to utilize up to 7 inclement weather days, we have those scheduled through the 18th of June. So again, of note, some of the changes from this year's calendar to the 2020-2021 from the calendar committee. This calendar does start 4 days before Labor Day. We are decreasing the number of professional development days for staff at the beginning of the year. There was quite a conversation around the need for those days to be in the school year versus all at the beginning, all at the front end. And then, of course, providing 4 full PD days, as I mentioned, and the way that that's being done is including that October 16th date, which, as you all know, is coming up this Friday, where MSEA, we would typically be closed. This would provide teachers with the opportunity to use that as a professional development day instead of a closure, and utilizing one of the reinstated PD days in March. And then one additional closure day for students at spring break. That's where we have another full PD day for our staff. My left-handedness, I'm trying to make it go forward with the wrong button. Sorry, excuse me. I trick technology all the time with that when they have to remote into my computer. So one of the things that I wanted to do, I know that one of the largest conversation points is around the pre and post Labor Day start. So I wanted to also share with the board what the calendar committee recommendation would look like if you waited till the day after Labor Day to start. So the only thing different in this calendar is that 180 day count, the 180 student days count, starts the day after Labor Day. And in doing that, you can see that then pushes the last day of school for students from the 9th to the 15th if we don't have any inclement weather. If we have inclement weather, which we traditionally do in Maryland, students could be getting out as late as June 24th if you start school on September 8th versus September 1st. So just to summarize those differences, I wanted to do a side-by-side comparison for you all to see that visual. And plus, I think that for most parents, the key is when do we start and when do we end? And so I wanted to put that up there. So starting September 1st, last day would be June 18th if you use all 7 inclement weather days. If you don't, you could be out as early as June 9th. And then post-Labor Day, that start of September 8th, would put you with all 7 inclement weather days, your last day being June 24th. Without any inclement weather days, it would be June 15th. And obviously the number of school closures, the difference in that 22 versus 21 is that Labor Day holiday. So this information is being shared with the board. What we will do now is put the calendar out on the website and open it for public comment. Last year, we started communicating with parents a little more aggressively about this information being out there to try to encourage that feedback so that you all have as much input from our community as possible. So we'll do that same thing again this year, encouraging parents and even staff to provide some feedback on the calendar, and of course students. I'm sorry, Christian. In order to make sure that we're hearing those voices. I think we had a really nice committee this year who they worked very hard to come to agreement. It was a really productive conversation. I think Patrice had even, Ms. Riccardi had even made some comments specifically to that fact, which we really appreciated all of the input and the encouraging. It was very encouraging to see the work that was being done to hear each other's voices and move forward with presenting a unified calendar to the board. And if you have any questions that I can answer, I'd be happy to do that. I'm sorry, Christian. It is open for 60 days of public comment, and so we will be sending those to you. Typically, we've done that on a weekly basis, so we will try to keep up that same pattern so that you are not receiving all of them at once at the end, especially because the 60-day of public comment ends on a Friday, and then we will be back here on that Monday. So we'll make sure you're getting them as things move along so that you can have any conversations you need to or send any questions our way that you may need to do. Christian.
So traditionally, if I recall, we have put the calendar on the website, the proposed committee calendar, to then garner feedback. For this year, are we producing both the potential pre-Labor Day and post-Labor Day start, or just the calendar committee recommendation for input?
So my thought process was, in order to keep things clear, is to put the calendar committee's recommendation on the website. However, we also know that we get a lot of interaction on Facebook. So one of the things that I was thinking was that visual, so that people could see both, and maybe even giving this PowerPoint all of these slides so that people can see that breakdown, that side by side, to help make sure that our community knows what they're asking for, with either start date, which we are anticipating will be the largest conversation piece. It could be something else, but this way, hopefully, we can put clear information out as to what the repercussions are, whatever date you choose to start as a board.
And I would even suggest that this slide is a really, specifically for the parents where their main concern is start and end
Exactly.
date. This right here could be a great succinct look
Exactly.
at our options.
And it's important too to remember that we do have a lot of families that always comment on those holiday breaks. And that's why I want to make sure we also include that visual of, okay, now you need to plan on, I think it's the Easter break. They need to plan on that extra day, that Tuesday. If the board decides to approve the calendar committee recommendation, that be a professional development day, because that would be different for our families. So that's a great point.
For God.
First of all, I wanted to really congratulate you. That was quite amazing to come to consensus in an hour and 15 minutes with that many people on a committee. And I think there were 6 breakout groups at the same time. So I thought it went really well because we had the opportunity with those special interest groups en masse. I guess from here, I'm just speaking really because we are streaming, that we did receive a lot of comment requesting from parents the post-Labor Day start. And I really want to voice that for me, it did not fall on deaf ears, but based on the late Labor Day start, we were pushed to the decision. And I concur with the decision that we made, but I really wanted to speak to those parents who have been given feedback that we did hear their concern. I also got concern from the farming community and shared where the list of those members can be found on the website, and if for next year there were any recommendations on any expansion to the committee, that it certainly would be considered, and received some comment that this is just a year after year without considering public comment. And our policy clearly states that this is an annual process where there's no guarantee it would happen again or not post or pre-Labor Day next year based on the dynamics of the special interest groups where the feedback is delivered in that calendar committee. So mainly, we did try to take everybody's thoughts into consideration before coming up with this recommendation. We felt we had a broad range of special interest groups there, but that could be modified for future. And I agree with what Christian is saying, to really try to show the impacts of a post-Labor Day start. So, thank you, though. Very good.
Of course, my pleasure. And if Superintendent Bolson is okay with it, I would love to share with you and anyone else on the board that would like to hear, because it does, when I hear that people say that the public comment isn't listened to, I know because I'm at this point, and then also at the point where we come back after the 60 days of comment, we can go back and look and share with you where the board did make changes. And I know Rachel and Jansen are nodding because they were part of that, where they did make changes based on public comment. So I do want our community to know that they are being heard, and that the board does take those comments into consideration, and we can share that with you if you'd like.
Thank you.
Yeah, something else, Christian?
I do have a couple more questions. I'm full of questions tonight, sorry. So if we were to go with the route of the later start and the post-Labor Day start, would that impact the time for seniors graduating? Because that might have implications on testing and quarter length. Do we know if that would change or stay the same if the calendar were to shift, if the board were to go a different direction than the committee recommendation? Is Mike here? I think that would have to be a conversation probably with HCC as well, because a lot of the graduations are at the APGFCU arena. So typically they start the Friday before Memorial Day for C. Milton Wright. So I am not sure how that would come into play, because it might also be a conversation about whether or not their graduation date is changing because of that later Labor Day start. I'm not sure about their calendar. Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or...
That's my understanding, is
Thank you.
Thank you. And one final question. I didn't see it. What was the last possible day for teachers with the post-Labor Day start?
So with post-Labor Day, you are looking at June 28th because of those 2 professional development days at the end of the school year. And hopefully you guys have this on your screens in front of you too. It's probably a lot easier to see there. With the pre-Labor Day start, it would be June 22nd.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Carmelo?
How do we get public comments when this just came to the board tonight?
So it's put out for public comment for 60 days,
When? Tonight? Tomorrow?
tomorrow morning.
Right, so how have we already gotten public comments? You mentioned that we've gotten public, how did we get those?
I can speak to that, Kathy. Because I was on the calendar committee, I had people reach out to me directly.
Okay,
You can speak, feel
It's
free.
on the
It's okay.
agenda on the website as well.
what was on the agenda, but normally this doesn't go out to public comment until you put it
No.
out for public comment.
Correct. It has not gone out officially for public comment.
Right.
We did start receiving contact forms, and it probably did align with when it was posted on the agenda. Only a handful, not many, but we have received a few to, I believe, the general contact form, but I believe one may have been sent directly.
And I just want to speak, the ones I'm basically referring to were the parents that came through the proper channel that we as a board saw regarding requesting, because they were aware of the calendar committee asking for a post-Labor Day start. And I did have farming community reach out to me directly. And we can talk offline, and
Okay.
happy to talk.
Okay.
Okay.
And the other thing, the last thing is Veterans Day, and I have no problem with Veterans Day, okay? But I went a couple of years ago to Grandparents' Day at Forest Hill, and it was on Veterans Day. And school was in session, and Weekly Reader came out in kindergarten, and I thought that was great, because these students in every class, and I had three at Forest Hill, and 2 at North Bend, and each class did something with Veterans Day when I visited them that day. So I was shocked to see that now we're going to take it off, because our veterans used to love to go to our schools and talk to our students. So did they change the law and I missed it over the last 2 years? Or?
No, that actually is one of the dates that we have listed on the board closures, because it's not a negotiated closure, but last year, the board had elected to observe Veterans Day as a closure for schools and offices. So this year, as I shared, I had that listed as a board closure holiday as the calendar committee was reviewing options. And there was discussion around that. And I had shared that, as the board had set that as a closure, that would have to include some additional dialogue with this board before I would recommend as the calendar committee chair to make that change. That I felt as though the board really needed to be involved in that conversation.
Well, I didn't know Weekly Reader still existed, but it was nice to see that. But these children were learning about the importance of Veterans Day. And I always felt that children who were at home every day were not getting that. We're not getting the veterans visiting the schools. We're not learning about the importance of our veterans and what they've given to our country when they're out of school. That's all I have to say about that.
So, I don't know what would be the best route, Ms. Carmelo. We could either provide you with that link to that last board meeting where those conversations were had, because we did have Mr. Topher brought some information about what had been done in the classrooms, and then there was also some public comment that board, the sitting board at the time, considered before making that decision to add that closure last year before they voted on the final calendar in December of last year. So I'd be more than happy to see what I can do to get that to you if you'd like to hear.
I'll find it.
Okay.
I'll find
Okay.
it. But I think it was, I remember when it was discussed, I was here, but
Okay.
I don't remember everything. But and I remember thinking at the time, the importance of this day, in reaching so many students and letting them remember what our veterans have done for us as a country. And I think that's extremely important. Thank you.
Any more comments, questions? Thank you.
Thank you.